everybody? Welcome to the Black Castaways. So I'm here today with my boy Marq, down representing Brazil as always. And just in case y'all have been wondering, we've been talking about doing this show probably for a few months. We kind of gave a lead in on some of the other past shows, but today we're going to do it as we kick off the new year. So what am I talking about? Well, if you listen to some of our other shows, Marq and I have a thing for Black sitcoms, especially Black sitcoms of the 70s. And it's because they influenced our lives so much. And as we've gotten older over the years, we now realize like, wow, that reminds me of an episode of, and I guess it's kind of like what was it, Star Trek people, where they always talk about, in Star Trek, such and such and such happened. And so for us, all things probably have happened in a Norman Lear production at one time or another. For me, definitely Good Times. For Marq, he is the aficionado on All in the Family, the Jeffersons, Sanford and Son. So what we're going to do today is just going to be our kickoff show, because we're going to end up looking at really all of the sitcoms of the 70s. I'll say many of the sitcoms put together by Norman Lear in the 70s. But we're only really focusing on their impact in the Black community. So what you're going to find is quite interesting is that this impact on the Black community doesn't begin with the Black sitcom like Good Times or Sanford and Son or the Jeffersons. This whole foundation starts with white sitcoms. And so we're going to tie all of this together. And I think the one thing that we really want to show the audience, and we talk about all the time, the impact that these shows had on our lives, how we view the world, how we think, and the agendas that were actually already being put in place way back even into the 70s, that here it is now, 50 years later, we're still having vigorous discussions about many of these type of topics. So, Marq, that's just kind of my intro. Any intro you wanted to add in there before we jump right in?
Okay, well, let me start by saying this. Many of these sitcoms that we watched, I was explaining this, I was sharing this with you. We've been having actually this conversation about Black sitcoms for at least 6 to 7 months. It's been a while. So the clips I want to start with today, as you just said, they're not Black sitcoms, but because they are so representative of how people saw race at the time. And here it is 50 years later, and these clips and these situations are still so relevant today. It's like things really haven't changed really that much. So in order to get into this, let me finish what I was saying to start this. Most of us were really too young to see some of these shows when they were actually being recorded. A lot of us, I think shows like the Jeffersons and Good Times, even Sanford and Son, those are shows that we grew up watching in syndication. I vaguely remember as a little kid, this was in the TV days where you wanted to change the channel. It's like, get up and go over there and change the channel.
Right.
Because we didn't have remote controls at that time.
That's
so
right.
I vaguely remember seeing these shows when they were on like a Sunday night or a Friday night. But most of my experience comes from I'll say the 80s and syndication, and being able to see that was my exposure to all of this. Now, introducing this first clip that I want to show comes from a program that I really just, as a child, I couldn't watch it. I didn't get it. I didn't see why my parents watched this show like I think it was on Sunday nights. Every Sunday they watched this show, and I'm just like, why are you watching this? It's like you watching this grouchy, racist white man on this show. And I'm like, what do you get out of this? I remember some years later, one of my friends on the block had said to me, Marq, if you can watch George Jefferson crack jokes about white people, then you can watch Archie Bunker crack jokes about Black people. At that time, I couldn't get into All in the Family. I look at that show now with all of the clips they have on YouTube. I'm like, wow. When we talk about social engineering, social agendas, leftist movements, where people coming from on the conservative side, all of this stuff that we're seeing today, you can find it in All in the Family. You see it in the fights between Archie and the meathead. He's calling him a communist. You see it in the feminism with Gloria in the house. You see this, how can we say, meeting of the generations and the conflict between Gloria and her mother, who's more she comes from the school that says you obey your husband, whereas Gloria is trying to break out of that because feminism was on the rise at that time. You also have where you have black people moving on up.
Mhm.
Now, and this is where we see the Jeffersons come out of all in the Family, and then they move on to their own show where the theme song is called "Moving On Up." George Jefferson and his family actually they passed over All in the Family. They passed over the Bunkers in their ascension socially,
Mm.
and how white people were seeing that. There was an episode where they had covenants in there, where Archie Bunker was participating in a neighborhood covenant to keep non-whites out of the neighborhood. All of this stuff is in All in the Family, and it's like you have to look at All in the Family because it laid the groundwork for all of these shows that we grew up watching on the black side. So I can't call All in the Family is obviously not a black show, but black shows started to evolve out of the groundwork with that All in the Family set for what you can and cannot say on television. So that's why, looking back now, I understand why this program was so important.
Man, that's a good point. That's a good point. Because I like what you said about what you can and can't say on television. I think let's go back for a second. All of this starts with, as the guy I mentioned, Norman Lear. We're not going to go deep into the history of Norman Lear, but let's just say Norman Lear pretty much had the keys to the kingdom. He was able to pretty much, give the red light and green light to any show that was getting ready to come out. And he was also given the creative opportunities to really say, this is what I want to do. And I'm sure the other execs said, well, wait a minute, this hasn't been done before. And he said, but this is what I want to do. And I know in the case of Good Times, there had never been a Black American family on national television like that. So, and we'll go into some of the problems that came with that later. But you make a great point. It was almost like coming out of the civil rights movement into the 70s. Black folks had started integrating, still dealing with some issues going on where you can live, etc. It's like Norman Lear and the script writers on his shows, they were still tackling topics that they probably could not have discussed on television 10 years prior, but now it was beginning to be okay. I guess because the era we were in, I think it was a lot more acceptable, and it's always interesting on who they use to deliver those messages as well. So I'm sure we're going to talk about that too.
Oh man, you particularly when we're talking about the Jeffersons, some of the things that came out about that show, some of the actors that were portraying these characters on the show, and then you look at their background, it's like, that's kind of strange. But and we've talked about this, off camera before. Why is it that these types of sitcoms arose at that time? And why is it that when I look at All in the Family now, the message that I get is that there are certain movements, there are certain groups, we'll say, who have a desire to change America, to change the West, right? So they use these characters to change our perceptions, to mold us into what they want us to become. So in essence, as a child, I would have never been able to catch this. But watching the Jeffersons and then going back and watching All in the Family, I see what they're doing. They want to make Archie Bunker seem like a skeleton. He want to make him look like the dinosaur, make him look like the village idiot, so that they can frame America to say, look, people, this is Archie Bunker. You don't want to be like him. He's a skeleton. He's a dinosaur. We're much more advanced than that. So going back to what you just said, a lot of people who were looking at like the All in the Family and then the Jeffersons, it was like a TV show with a black man calling a white man honky. That'll never work. America won't buy that. And then the Jeffersons went on to be on TV. It was the longest running television show, in TV history. I don't know if that's still true, but it was on TV for 11 years. Wow. So they broke the boundaries they expanded the boundaries of America. And I'm not necessarily saying that's a good thing or a bad thing. That's a whole nother conversation. But when you look at All in the Family, the Jeffersons, and these other shows in the context of our social parameters, they were very influential in our perceptions of our world.
I have to throw this in here because we have not talked about this, but now that you have said it, Archie Bunker and what he represented and what we have just witnessed here in the US, where that white male who feels like he's been ignored, His issues have been ignored. His neighborhoods have changed. He no longer, he complains about feminism. We know that one of the big topics that was discussed with the recent election was the fact that, you know, you don't want communism, you don't want socialism. That's why you don't want to vote for Bernie Sanders. All of these things, that white male that was, we'll just, like you said, pretty much mocked as a dinosaur that was going out. It's 50 years later, that white man hasn't gone anywhere.
It's amazing. The conversations between, like, really, Archie Bunker is really like an idiot, right? Then you have this other side with this intellectual son-in-law that he has. And it's funny because there's so many episodes that apply to what we're talking about right now. I was already having this conversation with people in some of my groups, like, you guys are going to vote for Joe Biden like he's just so much greater than Donald Trump. And I'm like, you're going to see what Joe Biden is all about, and you're already seeing this. So it's like, how can I put this? This is representing where we want to stay, whereas this is representing where we want to go forward. And I'm looking at both sides, like neither one of those sides are where I really want to go as a Black man, right?
Good stuff.
I mean, it's like, yeah, I mean, he says you don't want to go down the road of communism. And this is what Archie Bunker is consistently saying to Mike. And Mike sees himself as this great liberal, but then there's episodes where him and Lionel got into it. He was like, dude, don't speak for me. You know, it was, man, we'll have to get into that another time, but the dynamic between these, Archie Bunker is flat out, I don't like you Negroes, right? Whereas Mike is saying, no, I like Negroes. It's basically, as long as they stay in their place and we can control them. That's how it looked to me. And when you, coming out of the social movements that I've seen, this is what still goes on today.
He definitely is the white liberal that we will later discuss 50 years later.
Right.
And as many people found out, whether we're talking about the times, I think many Black people went through that phase where, whether it was George Floyd, Trayvon Martin, etc., that their white liberal friends that they thought understood them, when they saw their social media pages and saw what they were saying.
This is what I'm saying.
Wait a minute, but I thought that you voted for Barack Obama. I thought you were a Democrat too. And you know, things got switched up. All right, we won't go completely into that.
I know we'll go. I know there's so many episodes that I've watched. It's like, man, people need to watch this now. They were talking about this 50 years ago. And this is what Malcolm X is always talking about. Like, look, Black people are a football between the white conservative and the white liberal, and really, that's what you see. That's what's at play on All in the Family.
Yes. And the question becomes, and I'm going to kind of move over to both Good Times and the Jeffersons to a certain degree. You have no side, and I think that's similar to what Claude Anderson would say. You don't have a dog in this show. You don't have a horse in this race, but yet you are always being used. And both families, no matter how much George moved on up, he still always found that he was being viewed a certain way. And we got those classic episodes. Good Times found that really, in the end, no matter how many social things that they wanted to support, as James said, the government can't be changed unless you're in the government. And the rules of the government can't be changed unless you're in the government. So both Black people still found themselves on the outs. But I think the key message in going off of what you originally said is that although Archie Bunker was supposed to look like the village idiot, maybe Archie Bunker wasn't that bad and way off after all, especially looking back 50 years later on some of the things that he was worried about.
Well, man, we can go so many places with that. It's like, again, the classic question, which type of the races would you rather deal with? With Archie Bunker, you know exactly where he's coming from.
Yes.
With the white liberal, you think you know him, but you don't really know him.
Yes.
Now, the other dynamic I want to throw in here, since we make this comparison, and Good Times and the Jeffersons symbolize so much of what Black life is, but I wish these type of shows existed in Brazil because they really need them. When I first started getting into studies here about the Black population in Brazil, people said, I was reading some really intriguing things like, they getting the same thing here. It's like they were saying that racism for Black people in the favelas are the slums of Brazil. You don't really feel the real racism because society expects you to be there. You don't experience racism until you move on up into the society where you're not expected to be. And that's what we're seeing at play on Good Times versus the Jeffersons.
Okay, good. Way to lay that foundation. That was a great point. So, all right. So Now that that foundation has been laid, let's go back to where the racism really started, or at least we'll say the foundation was being laid absent or slightly absent of Black people on All in the Family. So I'm
Mhm.
going to turn it over to you, lay down that groundwork for All in the Family, and we'll start the tree from that trunk.
All right, let me just throw in a couple of things just to get to get the ball rolling here. First of all, understand that the Bunkers are, you could say it's a working class white family that's just barely getting by. You know, Archie Bunker is not happy with his lot in life. You know, there's times when he's like driving a taxi cab. You know, it's a traditional white family. You know, the stay-at-home mom and the very conservative, father of the family. Um, so what I want to get at here is that Archie Bunker is stuck in the middle of this general change in society, and he's not ready for it. This is why we call it conservatives, right? Like, I want things to stay the way they are. I would particularly, it would be better for me if I can improve my lot in life. But this is what Archie Bunker represents. And this particular episode I want to go through right now, it kind of personifies, it symbolizes what I'm saying about this confusion about how you're going to deal with Black people. You got this type of Black people and you got this type of Black people. All in the Family came around in the early 70s, where, remember, we're coming out of civil rights. Like, we're at the tail end of them really trying to break down the Black Panther movement and all of that. So you got two different types of Black people that America is dealing with when you're dealing with the civil rights movement versus the Black Panther movement, right? Archie Bunker doesn't know how to deal with either one of them, right? And he shows that. So this first clip I want to show, I want to highlight a masterful piece of acting that this brother did in this episode. Again, All in the Family is not a Black sitcom, but because it touches on race and attitudes towards race and that conservative idea that I can't accept the changes that America has taken us to. So this is the first clip that I want to start with.
Hey, roll it.
Let's get this going here. All right, so what we got here in this episode, if I'm not mistaken, the Bunker's refrigerator broke down. And so Archie didn't know how to fix it. So he called some repairmen, right? The repairman is a white guy and a Black guy. The Black guy is played by an actor named Ron Glass. He was famous for his role on Barney Miller. And you saw Ron Glass pop up on a lot of sitcoms, in the mid 70s. But this piece of acting to me was just incredible. So Archie doesn't want to get exploited. Another thing I need to explain here is that in this show, Mike and Archie are arguing about how this situation went. You know how when you talk to people, somebody sees something and somebody else sees something, and they can be two completely different stories. Like, that's not how it happened. So this is how this whole episode is laying out. Archie's telling his side, Mike is telling his side, and somebody is lying. So let's just take a look at this first. I'm setting this up where Ron Glass comes into the scene.
Because I want to show you 3 different scenes with Ron Glass. And they're going to be short. We can't show the whole thing, all of that. But so check this out.
I ain't paying you for that. Come on in and start work. Right you are, Mr. Bunker. Come on in, Jack. What? Who are you? I was the repairman's helper, sir. What do you do? Help run up the bills? Yes, sir. Yes, sir. Oh, yes, sir. Yes, sir. Yes, sir. Yes, sir. Anything you say, sir. It's a beautiful night, ain't it, sir? Oh, it's lousy. The icebox is broke. All right. What time you got starting here? 6:11. I'm sympathizing my watch with yours. You know what I mean? You mean you're worried you won't get a fair shake on the time? I mean, there ain't no use in you trying to stretch out the job, because I know exactly when you begun. Hey, Mr. Bunker, got the tools, Jack? Tools? Oh, yeah, the tools. I'll go get them out the truck while you sizing up the job. Oh, look at it. It's going to take all night long. It's going to cost me an arm and a leg here.
All right, now. Okay, so tell me something right here. What do you get from it?
What did you see when you get that?
Well, first, I didn't want to disrupt you when you were talking and make you lose your thought, but we need to come up with some kind of game whether, I don't know, we're gonna have to drink some water or whatever we're drinking. I don't know what we're gonna do, but we need to come up with something when an actor that appeared in all 2 or all 3 of these sitcoms. Because we know you mentioned Ron Glass here, and we know Ron Glass shows up in Good Times. And I think we're gonna probably talk about a ton of people that appear in all of these different episodes, which in and of itself is actually tremendous. Because a lot of these folks, we only know them really from the sitcoms. It's like, wow, I remember him when I was a kid. But to go back, what I got was Ron comes in and Archie is willing to accept him in this stereotypical yes sir role of coming in to do his work. And then, you know, Archie is already looking at him when he has to go out and get his tools, like he's being lazy and gonna take all day and take his time. But he didn't have any problem with him being kind of this subservient dude coming in and do the work, especially as long as the white guy was in charge of him.
Okay, well, not only that, but okay, now, where I want to go with this is, okay, now that I've introduced you to the Ron Glass, the character he's playing. Now, keep it fresh in your mind what you just saw, because there's something very, let me just show you the second clip, and then we'll go from there. Where's my button?
I'll also point out that Archie was supposed to look stupid by saying he was going to sympathize his watch.
Okay, now that's something that you'll notice in every episode is that Archie Bunker cannot pronounce words. He's, like I said, he's an idiot. Okay, now, can you see my screen?
Yep.
Okay, here's the second clip.
Yes, I am, and whom are you, man? I come to fix your icebox. Oh, how nice of you to come so quick. Won't you step inside? Come on in, Jack. Oh, you gotta help her with your hand.
Black is beautiful, baby.
Okay, now. Okay, anything you want to add right now?
So now they flipped it up. And Archie don't know how to deal with it now. A black dude coming in that's got that militant look.
Okay, right. So I'm not going to go because I want to try to keep this shorter. But what I'm seeing here is that you see this transition between the yes sir boss type of black man. He's the Uncle Tom. He's the whatever you say, Mr. White Man. Now, the second character that Ron Glass plays, Archie is petrified of this guy. He calls him a black Mau Mau, right? Now, mind you, Mike is telling a story where he's calling that black guy, he was a harmless Uncle Tom. And then when Archie's telling his side of the story, he's like, no, that militant black Mau Mau. And when you watch the whole episode, it's like, wow, Ron Glass, he went from, we'll say a 1940s, 50 type Negro, and he updated that to a late 60s, early 70s black militant. And it was masterful how he pulled that off. You saw the difference in his clothes. You saw the difference in the way he was wearing his hair. He went from this, I don't know what he was doing with his hair, like some type of process. All of a sudden, he got the big afro going. It was a masterful piece of acting to me. And it showed that transition between white folks are accustomed to seeing the black man they can keep in this place. But then now you got this black man who's saying, you're not going to keep me in my place. I know who I am and I know who you are.
Man, I don't, can I take over on this one now? Because you just gave me the perfect segue. I was going to wait on this, but I have to bring it in now because what you just said leads me to the clip I was going to show with, can you briefly set it up for me as well? How was Maude related to All in the Family?
If I'm not mistaken, I think Maude was Edith's sister, either her sister or her cousin. Okay. And you look into her whole background. I mean, this is what I'm saying about how we're not going to go into Norman Lear per se, but I'm just saying you see that he's bringing all of these leftist politics to television. You see it in Maude. You see it in All in the Family. You see it in the Jeffersons because the Jeffersons represent this family that's not going to stay in the slum, this family that's moving up, right? So they're using the sitcom to show us the changes that's going on to America. And again, once again, white America is not particularly happy with the changes that's going on. And we're going to see this being key now that Joe Biden is the president here.
And correct me if I'm wrong, the spin off with Maude Maude's role probably in all of this was now to kind of introduce the world to more of a kind of carry on that legacy of the 60s of I Am Woman, Hear Me Roar, more that feminist perspective. So if we look again at the, we'll just say the agendas, right or wrong, that we're now, okay, we're going to now push this issue. Maude was the feminist branch of that, right?
There's no doubt about that. I mean, I have not analyzed the Maude show as per se. I haven't looked at that. I haven't analyzed it. Maybe one day I will. But the few episodes that I've seen of Maude and then her appearance on All in the Family, she was very much an antagonist, a person who's confronting Archie like, this is where we're going. You know, women, we're not staying in this place. And she had a lot of lip for Archie. She was challenging the Archie. So you got Black folks coming at Archie. You got feminists coming at Archie. You got communists coming at Archie. You got what he sees the Democratic Party as a threat. So all of these things are coming at the conservative white man. And this is what we see when we see like these people taking over the Capitol a couple of weeks ago. That's what this is coming from.
So what I find interesting then, Maude would certainly sound like she was more on to use again the labeling terms of a liberal, but yet Maude didn't have a problem having a Black maid.
That's the whole point. I'm gonna have to go into that because Maude in that sense is equal to Mike to me, because it's like you are coming across as the white liberal, like we're all equal. Open the door, let these Black people in. You know, Black people, they deserve a chance just like the rest of us. But how much of that are you going to allow before you put your foot down and be like, whoa, hold on now, I gave you enough, that's enough.
Well, I think we end up having that exact same statement come through by one man that may look familiar to the people that like Good Times. You begin to see Florida, or what later we would know as Florida Evans, is the maid of Maude. And that Black man, or I'll say Black folks in general, but in particular in this scene that I'm about to display, the Black man that shows up that says, we no longer have to be like you talked about with Ron Glass and his first character of, yes, sir, I'm here to do the work for you, sir. Yeah, that's right. This Black man comes in and he says, no, we're not going to do it like that. And so let me go find my clip and let me share this one. All right, cue this up. Man, thank you for opening that one up because that was actually perfect.
No, that's
Here we go. Let me know if we have any problems.
Oh, I remember this scene. Let's do it.
She'll still complain. All women, I tell you, I don't understand them. But especially you white women. You sit up here in your nice world, and instead of enjoying the things you got, you're worrying yourself sick about some women's rights. Well, let me tell you, baby, I'm Ebony. In the world I grew up in, a Black man couldn't even get a job. So the woman went out and worked and supported the family. And quiet as it's kept, none of us never wanted it that way. And some of us don't have to have it that way, like me. Now I got a J-O-B, and a good one. And if I have to work 2 jobs, then I will, because I am no longer going to be the husband of a Black maid.
Hey, you people ain't gonna be sucked in by that jive. Florida, he knows what he's talking about. He's Black. And what do you think I am, Sundance? You ain't listening to a Black problem woman. You listening to a male ego.
Oh, now wait a minute, Florida.
Oh, Henry, you wait a minute. Now you hurt because of your pride, and I love you for that. But I also resent you for not being just as proud of me as I am of you.
I am proud of you, Florida. It's just that I don't want you to be a maid no more.
Them two don't go together, Henry. Your mother was a maid. That's how your brothers got through school and you got to be a fireman. My grandmother was a maid. That's how my daddy got a new schooling. There are a lot of women, Henry, on both sides of my family who worked all their lives in white kitchens so their kids could get some of the things they should have. You want to be proud of something, Henry? You be proud of them, because they was all Black women. And I tell you, there ain't never been a better woman than that.
Dude, so much. You want to take it first, or you want me to take it first?
Well, I'll just say I find it highly interesting that in that clip, after what you have said, that's why I had to stop and bring it now, because it was the perfect segue into it. You have the feminist in this case of Maude not having a problem having a black maid. You have a black man coming in basically saying, look, I don't want my wife to have to do this. She doesn't have to be a maid. And what I really find interesting, you have the black woman immediately, when Maude seems to have this view of, you know what, okay, maybe he's right. The black woman then comes in and puts her place into the position of being a maid and gets on the man for basically saying, who are you to say that I can't be a maid because your mama was one, etc. That we can't even do this whole episode because we would go sidetracked into problems with the black man and the woman that gets displayed in this clip. But it goes to show you have Maude, you have this perfect setup for what later was going to be Good Times, because spoiler alert, James is going to be the dad, Florida is going to be the mom on Good Times, but you see this division that was already kind of being created in this show where they're showing this separation where a black man says, I no longer want to be what you thought I was in the 60s, the 40s, the 1840s. I now want to be the man that I can be and take care of my family. And we're going to see later on, did that really get allowed on the Norman Lear productions?
Man, that clip speaks to me in just so many different ways because it's like, it speaks to the scenario of the black woman still today. Like, do you identify more with your gender or do you identify more with your race, right? Because this issue comes up. James or Henry, interesting how they call him Henry, and then there was a Henry Jefferson on All in the Family also. They put his name. Anyway, he makes this strong point. And correct me if I'm wrong, but I didn't hear any applause after he made his statement. But then Florida comes in. I'm thinking, okay, join your man, back him up. But then she kind of threw the ball back on like, well, whose side is she on? It's like, are you rolling with the black side or are you rolling with the feminist side?
Yep.
So it was like, that was a topsy-turvy. That's like, it's just, where are you going with this? It almost represents, we still see this today where black women have this separation between, are we fighting for our gender or are we fighting for our blackness? And in some ways I understand that. But on the other side, by the show allowing Florida to take the applause, it's almost telling me we agree with what she's saying. What he said just didn't even happen. That's how it looked to me. One other thing, and then I'm gonna let you, I know you got something to say, but this is why I wish these shows, maybe they should be translated, because this is the exact same thing that's going on here right now, where black people who are making these ascensions into middle class in Brazil, they don't want to be maids. They don't want to open up a door and people automatically assume, oh, you're the help when you're actually the owner of the house. So this is the same, we're talking 40, 50 years ago, and this is the same dynamic that's playing down here right now, where black women have to say, look, there's nothing wrong with being a maid. I got to college now because my grandmother was a maid, her mother was a maid, and my mother was a maid. It's the exact same thing going on right now here.
Wow. I think it's interesting that if anything, James, or as you said, Henry in this case, he stepped up. He stepped up and said that he wanted to take care of his wife. And he was a fireman. And we certainly know in the black community, if you wore a uniform, you made good money. If you were a fireman, you made good money. So it did not seem that Florida would have had to work. It seemed like it would have been, as you kind of noted, whose side is she on? She's going to have to give up something. In this case, I guess we'll say her career. She's going to have to give up her career to depend on him. And we certainly know that if anything coming out of the 60s, your baby boom mothers, namely the white women, did not want to be dependent on their husbands any longer. That was what the liberation of the 60s was all about. So I think Florida made her decision. And you notice how she immediately checked Maude. Like, you ain't gonna believe him. Almost like, you're not gonna believe this man, not this black man, this man. You aren't gonna believe him, are you? And she jumped, she made a choice, what I think she didn't realize, she chose the white side and she chose the feminist side. She might have thought she was just choosing the feminist side, but she chose the white side as well. And if I may, let me go into where I was going to use this clip to lead into, because then for the Black Castaway audience, this was the first clip that I recall seeing of Henry and Florida, who will later become James and Florida Evans, as I just said a little bit ago. The key thing here, When Norman Lear wanted to set up Good Times, he did not want a father. He did not want a father. I think the originals were called the Black Family when they were shopping the pilot. Now, first of all, how are you going to have a pilot called the Black Family and you do not have a black man in the house?
Right.
So if anything, I'm so glad we saw a separation of Florida on Maude and Florida Evans, who would be on Good Times. The real Esther Roll, the woman that she was, came out and said, I am not going to do this show unless I have a black father in the house. And I guess the Norman Lear, the other execs still fought back against that, but Florida or Esther Roll stood her ground, and thankfully they ended up bringing in the iconic John Amos in to have him take on that role in the Black Family.
You know, ask ourselves this question. The producers were fighting Esther Roll because they wanted to have a single mother on that show. Did they actually win by killing him off?
Oh, you jumping ahead.
Well, I'm just saying. I'm like, did they get what they wanted from the beginning by killing him off? I mean, the show had built up its audience having this black family. Yeah, we were in the ghetto, we were in the projects. I'm saying, but we still had a family dynamic there. And we know what was going on now behind the scenes with John Amos, with some of the antics of JJ. We know that, but it was the perfect excuse to get rid of him. Like, okay, we let you have your black father for X amount of years. Now we gonna get what we want. It's almost like a perfect setup.
Yeah, so let me explain to the audience here. For those who don't know, John Amos, or James Evans on the show, he also was, I want to be that strong black man on the show. And so the early lines were written that way, where he was that black patriarchal father that we all grew up with. And I think that's one reason why this show resonated with us, that we still are talking about it almost 50 years later. His character resonated because we saw our fathers. We saw James in our dads or in our uncles. And sometimes, and if you were really lucky, you might have saw a little bit of that James in your black school teacher. So we saw that black image at home. So James Evans resonated with us. And so as the time went on over the first couple of seasons, originally, and this is also kind of funny, Michael Evans, the young kid, and let me play a clip. I want to play a clip real fast of who Michael Evans was. Michael Evans was really originally designed to be kind of the big showstopper, to be the big draw. And you touched on this earlier, and this is what I kind of alluded to. They were going to touch on these political, racist, or racial type of discussions via Michael Evans.
A kid.
A kid. In the same way that they use Archie Bunker, this old white man, we're going to make him look like he's going out of style. They were going to usher in kind of this new kind of mirror in front of white America. They were going to use a kid to say things. So instead of having George Jefferson say honky, you have Michael Evans calling them honkies. Right. You have Michael Evans saying the most threatening things. And so let me play this clip real fast as a perfect example of that.
You never walked away from a test before. Tell us what's really bothering you.
Mama, they don't know it, but that IQ exam was nothing but a white racist test.
Oh, Michael, how could it be a white racist test? All school children take it of all colors.
Yeah, but this one was given by the white people, made up by white people, and even graded by white people. It don't tell you how smart you are, just how white you are. That's why the average black scores 15 points lower than the average white.
Yeah, but son, you ain't average. Michael, you can pass any man's test in any color.
Maybe so, Daddy, but a lot of black kids can't. The black community is different. It has a different language and culture altogether.
You mean to tell me everybody don't eat chitlins for dinner? And speaking of dinner, morning, you better have your birth certificate out.
Questions on a test like this. Complete the following phrase. Cup and you have to choose from 4 words. Wall, saucer, table, and window. You know what my friend Eddie put down? Cup and table. Because in his house, they don't have no sauces to put under the cup.
I'm going to stop it there, just not to make it too long. But what you end up seeing, first, if you notice the body language of Florida and James, this is their young son talking to them. They are like, and if I would have played the clip and it would have continued, you would have heard them say, "You taught us something." So you have Michael always educating even his parents, because they kind of came back again, kind of from that, even if they didn't act that way, they still kind of had that mind of like, we only know what white folks have told us. And you have their young son always telling them, no, this is how we are going to now be as Black people, because I want to be a Supreme Court justice like Thurgood Marshall one day. And the other part of it is, when you look at Michael, you're in that scene with Michael, you notice, and me and my kids, we studied Good Times heavily last year, and working our way through the series. Show after show after show, JJ delivers. And again, for the crowd that may not have watched it, James or JJ was James Evans Jr. JJ is the oldest son. The daughter you saw in there was Thelma. She's in the middle. And then you have the younger son, Michael. JJ comes in almost every single serious moment when people should really be paying attention and marinating on what this young brother just said or what someone just said. JJ comes in with a stupid, what we'll call coonish line. You mean everybody don't eat chitlins? Almost every time. So what ended up happening, and I'll end and you can jump back in, after a few years, Florida and James, or John and Esther, both were getting tired of JJ always getting the funny lines, and they were writing more things for JJ. James ended up complaining, or John Amos ended up complaining about it a lot, and even talked to them about changing the script. And what happened? Over in between seasons, they just immediately wrote John Amos out. And now they got what they wanted. Florida raising some Black kids in the ghetto by herself.
Well, to speak to the first point, it smacks of, we'll allow you to say X amount of things on TV, but we can't be too serious about this. It's almost like, how many years did it take? I mean, Black people started entering TV through, sitcoms. We started seeing these starring roles and protagonists in sitcoms, but it still took a couple more years till we could get to a dramatic series. It's like, okay, we'll deal with Black people as long as they entertaining us and making us laugh. How long would Good Times have lasted if they hadn't had JJ on that show, period? I mean, would the show have been carried with a Black audience if there was no JJ? Because that was too much for them to handle. So it's like, we got to break that up. There's too many Black people who might deal with somebody like Mike Evans, and it makes you think. And then it goes back and says, no, Black people don't think like that. Black people think like this. And that's when you bring the coon in, right?
Yep.
This plays into this. The clip that I just showed with All in the Family, showing these two characters that Ron Glass was playing. The other, white people can deal with this character, but not necessarily this character. And the last point I'm going to make, would we have a Huey Freeman without Michael Evans?
Ooh, Huey Freeman is who? Explain it to the audience, please. Ooh,
Huey Freeman comes from, first of all, it was a comic strip in a lot of newspapers across the United States, but then the comic strip became a TV cartoon called The Boondocks. And I think it debuted in like 2007, I want to say. And The Boondocks featured these two 10-year-old and an 8-year-old, two Black kids, two brothers, who were being raised by their grandfather in this suburb. They never really announced where the suburb. A lot of people think it was somewhere in Illinois. And Huey Freeman, he was like Michael Evans to the third power. I mean, just extreme militant dude. And then you had this, you got the Michael Evans JJ dynamic going on between Riley and Freeman, Riley and Huey on the Boondocks. It's the same thing repeated.
That is a great point. One I never thought about. I'm going to see if I can pull up even a short Huey Freeman clip so everyone knows who we're talking about in case they might not have been Boondock people. But that is a great point. I don't think, honestly, as the years went on, I'm really just winging this off the top of my head now. I don't think we really saw very many other sitcoms where you had a Michael Evans. Because if we then move on later on to where the Cosby Show came into play, Theo played the JJ character. You did not really have, I mean, he wasn't completely JJ, but he was still kind of the one, he matured, which JJ did as well, I must say. But Theo was always kind of the one that, he would crack the jokes, and Bill Cosby was always on him like, son, get yourself together. He wasn't straight up cooning like JJ was, though.
No, nobody.
Definitely wasn't going to be the militant bringing the firm black message coming in. I mean, I'm really gonna have to go back into my Cosby Show. I think that would have been not Rudy. What was the other one? What was Tempest Bledsoe? All right, we won't go down the Cosby lane. But I remember she would always be the one to have something like really intelligent to say, or maybe about a black issue. But
hey, what's her name?
I know.
Okay, we got
audience is tripping out.
Rudy. I can't even remember them.
Sandra Rudy.
Man.
I know. All right, let me.
That's a
keep
shame.
marinating on this. See,
okay, wait. Here's another thing to think about this for a minute.
Okay, go ahead. I'll still find that. Here we go.
On the Cosby Show, you can't have a Michael Evans on that show because these are middle class Negroes. They're upper middle class. You can't have a Michael Evans as speaking as like a Malcolm X. You can't have a Huey Freeman on the Cosby Show. It doesn't work. We're selling the image of Black America that's made it. We need to leave that militancy behind.
That's very good.
Which honestly, I believe that's part of the reason why the Cosby Show stayed on TV for so long. And this could go on forever. But when we look at the transition that they did with the Jeffersons, for example, the Jeffersons comes off of All in the Family, and you had George Jefferson he was saying stuff to white America that a black man is not supposed to say. But by the time that show transitioned into the later years, I mean, all of that fire and militancy was gone. It's become part of mainstream America now. Now that we've passed this line, damn, I mean, if you look at the way they play TV, they always get what they want. It's like, we just showed this with Good Time saying, we don't want a black father. Okay, we'll give you a black father, but then we're gonna kill him off. And the same thing with the Jeffersons. In the beginning, they didn't think having a black man saying the things that George Jefferson would say on the show would work on TV. They showed that it did work. And as that show went on, George got sillier and sillier. The writing got worse, and pretty soon they just took it off the air after 11 years. It didn't have the same fire that it had in the first 3 seasons.
Man, I'd never thought about it, but you're right. I know particularly in Good Times, as I said, JJ ended up maturing. And after they basically made JJ grow up and lead the family when the dad was gone, and when supposedly he had died. And so James was supposedly killed in a car accident in a classic episode we'll talk about another time. But Michael, as Michael grew up, he still would have those kind of one-liners. But by the time we go throughout the series, and it only ended up lasting for 6 seasons, by the time, once you took James, the whole chemistry of a black family with a firm black, even slightly revolutionary message, determined to get out the ghetto, that all left and it went mainstream, just like you were talking about with the Cosby Show. I never thought about that.
But man, all of the shows, this is the same thing that I noticed with all of the black sitcoms. Sanford and Son was cutting edge humor the first couple of seasons. Again, you had this dynamic where they were saying things about race and society that you weren't expecting to hear on TV. But man, those last 2 or 3 seasons, it was like, what happened?
Right.
They pulled the plug. It's like, let's just be a funny show now. We don't want to talk about social stuff anymore.
No, but the social things, particularly at Good Times, the social things they did talk about would be categorized under maybe typical poverty, low income type of problems. I use the term that they would have used back then, especially ghetto problems. So it was, with Thelma almost getting raped. They started talking about molestation. They started talking about drugs. JJ, I got VD, that classic episode. And on one end, I appreciate them, yes. And we have to definitely think a little Penny when Janet Jackson appeared on there. So you had child abuse. They talked about a vast array. But that hardcore black message being delivered through Michael, gone, completely gone. Because Michael became more concerned about just growing up, dating girls, kicking it with Fun Girl, if you remember that episode. Michael got more concerned about those items, even when he was going to move in with the white woman, with the white girl in college. That was like, old Michael, young Michael, young Michael wouldn't have dared thought about doing that. So,
okay, now check this out too. Going down and listening to our own analysis about these shows, these are certain things that we have to start to notice. Like, what are they trying to tell us here?
Mm-hmm.
The transition from George Jefferson on All in the Family to, it got to a point on the Jeffersons where Sherman Hemsley was saying to the writers, like, look, I need to stop calling him honky on TV. Like, George and Tom are buddies now. So what I'm seeing with all of these TV shows is that they give you all of this militancy when the show first comes out, but then as the show transitions, they become the Black people who are acceptable to white America. I mean, this is the way I'm seeing it. It's like, you just pointed out, talking about what happened with Michael as that series went on. It's like, okay, you're part of mainstream now. We don't want all of that stuff on TV anymore. This is what it seems to be going on with all of our Black TV shows. I mean, maybe you got a different opinion.
I don't, but maybe this is the reason why. Now, I don't know anything about the writers of All in the Family or the Jeffersons, but I have listened to the story of Eric Monty and listened to what happened, as well as John Amos's story on what happened behind the scenes on Good Times. Eric Monty was, first of all, Eric Monty and Michael Evans, the real Michael Evans,
right?
Mike Evans. Mm-hmm. They were the original writers and creators of Good Times. Mike Evans pitched the idea when he heard that Norman Lear wanted to do a show called On the Black Family. So Mike Evans, who was on the Jeffersons, or actually he was on All in the Family, said, let me put my bid in. Went and got Eric Monty. Eric Monty was, man, his story is amazing. Listen to how he went out to California. I mean, he was like 16, if not younger, to make it. And genius mind. And yes. And so Eric Monty was one of the main writers, again, with Mike Evans behind the scenes. And as the years went on, they started being pushed out. And so perhaps one of the reasons why the shows change is because the original writers, and I would wonder if it was the case in some of the other shows, especially the Black shows with the Jeffersons. I wonder if the color of the writers behind the scene changed, meaning that they got whiter. And once they got whiter, let's deal with these pop topics. Let's deal with things that are just, interesting, but because how are they going to really write about anything revolutionary if you're not Black? Or the only way you're going to be able to do it is in a stereotypical way, at least. They're
going to write Blackness as how they see it, how they interpret it. If you remember, Eric Monty actually said this in one of his interviews where he says that what led him to want to make it in Hollywood was this discussion that he was having with, I think he said, one of his Jewish friends. And the guy was like, I know Black people. This is how Black people are. And Eric Monty was like, no, I grew up in the hood in Chicago. This is not how Black people are. So they're always interpreting what they think Blackness is, which is exactly what we talk about, going behind the scenes and looking at, well, who's writing for these shows? And Eric Monty talked about, he got the boot.
Yep.
And it was mostly white writers writing on Good Times, which is the whole point in this. This is them looking at Black life about how they imagine Black life to be. So we always end up in the same situation.
And man, and we have to mention this because I think we're talking about Norman Lear a little too much, because we have to talk about Eric Monty for a moment, because that brother was the true backbone behind those sitcoms. And when you listen to his story, I'm going to paraphrase his story. Like many people, he ended up basically having to give up his rights on the show. He settled for far less than I'm not going to say should have, because he didn't have much of a choice. Eric Monty was a brother, like you said, from Chicago, went out, brought himself up from nothing in California to build what he built with these shows and the writing. And he ended up selling it all, giving it all over to Norman Lear, because Norman Lear had the lawyers, Norman Lear had Hollywood on his side, and basically Eric Monty had to take what he could settle to get.
Dude, somebody should, to tell you the truth, and I think this would probably never happen, but Eric Monte's story should be told like in a movie. It's a movie in itself, because realistically, we all grew up on Eric Monte's productions.
Yes.
His brain. Yes. Eric Monte was the one who came up with the idea for Good Times. Him and Mike Evans came up with that show. The idea of having a Black middle-class family in the Jeffersons, that came out of Eric Monte. Cooley High came out of Eric Monte, which led to what's happening. And I'm like, all this came out of this brother, and he's like, at some point he was like homeless. It's like, what is this? There's things we won't say on this show, and I understand why, But when you connect all of the dots, even Eric Monte didn't point this out, but when you connect all of the dots, everything that happened to him makes total sense.
Yeah, because we've seen it happen with other people. We'll say we've seen it happen with rappers and in the other portions of the entertainment industry, even with athletes. So,
and this is what I'm saying about if you can connect the dots, you'll see why this keeps happening over and over and over again. We could take Eric Monte's story and definitely, this is what I'm saying, connect them to what are these rappers talking about? It's the same story.
And I think I'm sorry, go ahead.
No, go ahead.
I would say I think it speaks to the larger issue as well when we talked about the very beginning of that white conservative and white liberal, where does the black person fit in? That even with the white liberal, as you noted when we started, you can only go so far. You can be on my sitcom, you can write for me, you can do this, but if you think you're going to have rights to what you created, you're out your mind. If you think you're going to get these what do you call them? I just state my mind. The checks, was it residual checks that come in that are, you know, when this stuff is when people are still talking about good times and they have to go ahead and the people on good times have to get paid, you're not going to have access to that. We'll give you what you've contributed now, but we are the ones that are going to feed our families for decades after what you created, not you, not your black community.
Exactly. Okay, now, man, you know, we got to keep it moving.
All right.
You know, we could just have one show, just one episode. That'd be a whole show we'll be talking about.
And that's what we're going to do, folks. We're going to try to break down one or two shows each episode, but we really wanted to just kind of give you the overview of you know, so we'll always refer back to this show if you know, so we don't have to go deep into Norman Lear or deep into Eric Monte, etc. You can always go back to this show to find out more. So yeah, let's try to close this up in about 15 minutes. So first, start back in at anything you want to add, and then I just want to throw in some things introducing why I chose Good Times as my favorite all-time sitcom.
All right, dude, wait.
That's had on me.
I got to show you I got to show you at least one more clip.
Go ahead.
Just one more clip. And this is what I'm saying about setting the stage for where America is going, okay? This is, you know, like I said, this is why I had to go back and start looking at this show, because they've been planning this for years, and people look at this stuff as if it's coincidence. Like, no, this is what you call social engineering. Okay, so now I'm going to go back. Another clip. Now, mind you, I want to make sure that everybody knows that originally, Mike Evans, who played Lionel on the Jeffersons, he was supposed to have a much bigger role. The show was supposed to center around him. And then they moved in, you know, his mother and father, and they just kind of nudged him out the way till he was just like a recurring character almost.
Wow.
So yeah, so the Jeffersons are introduced through Lionel. He was the first Jefferson on that show. So it's like the parents came later. So that's another little hidden fact about, you know, how our TV shows get changed from what they were originally supposed to be. But anyway, check out this scene right here, and then I'm going to explain it to you a little bit.
Let's check it out. This episode is called Lionel Steps Out.
And your father just popped into my mind.
Oh, okay, wait. Now, what's going on here? Let me finish showing you this little clip right here, and then we'll go from there.
I remember this.
I bet I know what it is. Oh, I knew it. Look, everybody.
Oh, that's a nice picture.
Pretty good. What do you think, Anita?
Oh, it's very nice. He's got his arm around you, don't he? When was this taken? At the party we went to last week at Trudy's, remember? That's where Linda met Lionel. Oh.
Well, excuse us, everybody. We got to be going. Come on, Linda.
Oh, Aunt Edith, would you please put the picture up in the bedroom for me?
I'll put it in your suitcase so you
Put it on top of the dresser. Bye-bye.
Okay, now I'm gonna fast this forward real quick so you can see the result of this, right?
It's a picture of some people.
Okay, so we're trying to keep this short, so I'm gonna cut it right there. But the thing that I didn't show is that Edith was in the room when Archie came home, and she did not want him to see that picture. I mean, she was trying to interrupt him. She put the picture down. She was trying to keep his attention away from looking at the picture because she knew how he was going to react when he saw that picture. And he exploded. I didn't show you the whole scene, but he exploded with that. It led into a conversation with Lionel because Archie was just like, "I thought you were one of the good Negroes, you know." And they went into the kitchen and had a conversation. And Lionel got at him like, "Dude, you know, I've been dealing with you all these years, but you know, you don't tell me what to do. I'm my own man." It was another situation in a sitcom that showed Black people are no longer going to be the Uncle Tom character that we saw Ron Glass portraying in the previous episode that I was showing. It's making this transition. Now, why this is important to me is because the exact same thing damn near happened to me the first time I went out with a white girl. It was like the parents, the first time I went and met a white girl's parents, they didn't explode the way Archie Bunker did in my face. They exploded with her after I left. I wish I would have saw this episode. I had been conscious of this episode before I had that experience myself. But it speaks to, we're going to push an interracial agenda in America now, because at that time it was like, you still had less than 1% of America was married interracially at that point. And look where we are now. And then you go from All in the Family showing this one little clip with Lionel dating the girl in this episode I was just showing you is Archie Bunker's brother's daughter. Okay, so this is his niece that's going out with Lionel. They just went out on a date. They weren't actually dating. You go from this introducing an interracial couple on a show. And then out of that, we get the Jeffersons with a full-blown interracial couple that's part of the regular sitcom on every episode. I'm gonna pass it over to you to get your thoughts on this.
Man, that was good. You know, I did not think about that direct connection going over to the Jeffersons with the interracial couple. That is very, very, and also, as you and I both know, if we look statistically, if we in so-called interracial couples, usually it's a Black male with a white female, but yet in the Jeffersons, you had a white male with a Black female, which I'm sure.
Why is that?
I'm going to assume it's a lot more palatable to the audience because the white man, I mean, let's be honest, he's had access to the Black woman ever since, since slavery. So they wouldn't have a problem seeing that. Not like All in the Family not All in the Family. Real quick, All My Children, the sitcom where you had Jesse with Jenny. I mean, I know you didn't watch soap operas, but this was a soap opera.
I remember the couple though.
And that was, man, they got all kind of male because they were an interracial couple. You had this thuggish Black dude with this precious white woman. So I think I would say that I forgot their names, but I would say they would be much more acceptable. Tom and Helen, they would be much more acceptable than having it the other way around.
Okay, a couple other points I'm going to make on here. As they always do this when they switch actors and characters, the original Tom and Helen that appeared on All in the Family were not Franklin Cover and Roxy Roker. They had two completely different people playing the Willises on when they appeared on All in the Family. Two different actresses. When you see the Black woman who played Jenny's mother, you'll recognize her. She's been in a lot of Black sitcoms too. But the other thing I want to mention about this plays into, again, what America is not ready for. Okay, you just pointed out interracial couples generally feature a Black man and a white woman. On the Jeffersons, they couldn't have that. So they had the white man and a Black woman, just like you said. White man has always had access to the Black woman. So we'll introduce this, but we don't want to piss too many people off. Let's start it with a white man and a Black woman. That's the first thing on the Jeffersons they couldn't deal with. Second thing is, for all of us who watched a lot of Jeffersons episodes will remember what the Willis's kids look like.
Oh,
Jenny Willis looked like a typical black woman. She did not look mixed. They also had two different actors play, mostly one of them, just the same way they did two different Lionels, but there was more Mike Evans than Damon Evans. They also had two white actors who played the Willis's son, and he looked like a regular white guy. It's
I
like,
remember that.
you're willing to deal and introduce interracial couples on TV, but you can't even show the result of the interracial couple. You're gonna show, how often are you gonna see an interracial couple where the kids look just mostly black or mostly white? Most mixed kids are gonna come out looking a mixture of the two races. The Jeffersons couldn't even deal with a mixed kid.
Yeah, let me go ahead. I'm gonna just show people a picture. That was her.
I mean, if you're just gonna go by like one dropism and say, okay, this girl could have some European ancestry, but this is a black woman.
Right. Do you recall the name of the? I do remember the son as well. I don't remember his name though.
Which son? Alan?
It was Alan. Okay, let me see. So
Alan Willis.
Because I remember seeing, and I remember what I didn't like about looking at him. It was like, man, was it two of them on there?
There were two Alan Willis. This is what I'm saying. The dude with the stringier hair was the more common one, but then there was this other guy with this kind of.
All right, here's what's popping
He
up.
had this hair.
Tell me. Wow. All righty.
Mm-hmm.
Oh, it's not showing up. Come on.
What you looking for?
I have a picture, but it didn't want to pop up of Alan Willis.
Which one did you get?
Well, both of them are showing up on here.
Okay.
Google is gonna make me open up its service, and I don't want to do that. But I'll just do it this way. I'll share it like this. The two that we see that popped up, we have this one here.
Right. Mm-hmm. That's the second guy. Right.
That one there.
Right.
All
that's
right.
the more common one.
Neither one of them. If anything, this might be the closest one. It looked like he could be, but certainly not that one.
Guy. Right. So this is what I'm saying. Like okay, let's look at it this way. Television and how they represent society is gonna be in elements. They're gonna be in phases. Like, we can't just throw all of this out at white people all at the same time. Whereas now, I haven't been in the States in 8 years, but from what I'm seeing on YouTube, people are talking about, like, look at all the interracial TV commercials that we have on TV now.
Yeah.
You got movies with interracial couples. It's a free-for-all now. As I said, they are really pushing America in the direction of what I see in Brazil every day. They just couldn't throw it all out there at one time, but they're slowly getting to where they want to go.
For the audience benefit, give me the old 6 degrees of separation, I guess, but we'll do this, the 6 degrees in the generation. What's the significance of Roxy Roker?
The significance of Roxy Roker.
Who is she? Isn't she the
let me say this about Roxy Roker, because at the time, she was just, the black woman in a racial marriage at the time. That's what I knew. But then you find out that when she was cast for the role, like I said, the Willises were portrayed by two different actors when they were all in a family. When they transitioned into the Jeffersons, that's when they got Franklin Cover and Roxy Roker. But the first thing about Roxy Roker is that the producers of the show says, look, we want to hire you to be Helen Willis, but you're going to have to be in an interracial couple. And Roxy Roker said, well, that's no problem, because I'm in an interracial couple in my real life. Right. So as most people, I don't know, maybe most people know, most people don't know about Roxy Roker is the mother of Lenny Kravitz. So it's always interesting to look. And she's also the sister of Al Roker, the weatherman on, what is it, NBC News?
Yeah. Yep.
Okay, so that's her brother. So she opened up a lot of doors for where we are right now. But that's a little story. I remember that I think she died in about 1991. I remember looking in Acquirer magazine. But that's what I know about Roxy Roker.
Wow. Yeah, I know a lot of people may not, because again, we got our younger folks that may be checking us out, and they may not. Hopefully, I mean, it's not like Lenny Kravitz has even been out recently, but still, it's a little bit of a connection there.
Like, who is Lenny Kravitz?
Right. Exactly. All right, in our closing moments, I want to go into why I chose James Evans and why Good Times. As I said, I saw James Evans as James Evans was like my TV dad. There were so many characters, and as we go throughout discussing the series, I'm going to reflect on things that my dad did that were just like James Evans. So it didn't seem foreign to me. And I have to say, James Evans, and if I ever had a chance to meet John Amos, you know, he's one of these people that I want to meet Reggie. I want Reggie Jackson. I want to meet Dr. Harry Edwards, and I want to meet John Amos. So if y'all are seeing this YouTube video, or if anybody watching this YouTube video,
I'll let your boy.
Guys, hit me up, slide in my DMs, as everybody wants to say. I mean, I want to meet those men, and we might have to throw in Lawrence Fishburne because Furious Styles, for obvious reasons. But that's the impact that they had on my life. I can truly say James Evans influenced me to the degree that he even shaped the kind of father that I would become. Obviously, along with my own dad, but there were so many times as a father, I looked at how James handled a situation that I may not be one I can personally relate to at the time. And I still look and I want to react the same way James Evans did. Let me give everyone an example. And this, you know, I'm going to play this clip because this is James Evans. This to me, and we actually, the kids and I studied this episode a couple of weeks ago. This episode really reflects on James Evans and the type of man that he was in the house. And again, let me set it up by saying it frustrates you. It should frustrate you, certainly as a Black person, as to that fact that they had to kill this man off and make Florida a single mother. But look at how James is with his family. And I'm just going to play this clip and we'll let it play out a little bit. But understand, as we talk about future episodes with James Evans, this is the kind of man that he was.
Quiet. Matter of fact, it's too quiet. Turn on the stereo.
Sorry, let me set this clip up real fast. The kid that you see with the gun is actually Florida's nephew, Cletus. So Cletus is there. He had robbed a bank, and he's a Black revolutionary. He's basically, it wasn't the Black Panthers. He was the Black Falcons. He was part of the Black Falcons. So Michael delivering the militant message. Michael's like, man, you a Black Falcon, brother. And so Michael goes up to, you know, kind of like, hey, brother, be all right. Because they found out he was wanted by the FBI. James told him, you can't stay here. Earlier in the episode, the electricity was so janky in their project apartment that every time they played the stereo, the lights would go out. It would blow a fuse. The circuit breaker would hit.
Right.
So Cletus is now mad. They kicking him out, won't let him stay. And so he's going to take Michael as a little bit of insurance to make sure they don't call the police back.
Stereo? The stereo. Yeah. Give me a little exit music. I mean, make things sound normal around here. Dig? Yeah, I dig. We don't want no trouble, Cletus. We don't want no trouble now, fella. Do like you're saying, turn on the stereo. Dig?
Okay, Dad. That's just what I'll do.
Junior, stop all that bouncing around like a fool. Are you all right, honey?
Relax, Flo. Everything's cool now, honey. Okay.
Cletus, I just don't understand. You were always such a good boy. You had dreams and ideals. What happened, son? Do you know what it's like out there in Florida? I mean, scratching and scrounging for every little penny. I mean, what you gotta do to make it if you're poor today? Damn if I know, Cletus. See, we so rich, we don't know. We've been sitting up here in this big penthouse on Lakeshore Drive, and all we do all day long, son, is eat caviar, count our stocks and bonds. What the hell would we know about that?
All right. So to me, that whole episode really, but particularly that scene, we're going to see it a lot as we talk about Good Times and James, of being the protector of his home. He's the man of his home. The trust that his kids knew that when he said turn on the stereo, they trusted dad has a plan. They trusted dad got this handle. And even in concert with his sons and with his daughter as well, giving her instructions on what to do, this man took his family out of harm and danger. I mean, that again, that man typifies what James and what we all need to be as the black man in our own homes. Because sometimes, as I think I do have personal experience with this, we have to protect our families and our homes, even from our own family members or from our own friends or somebody that seems like they're, you know, when you're living in the hood, people that you think are on your side, if they get involved in some dirt, they may change. They might not be on your side. And you see the integrity of James of like, man, we understand. You act like we balling up in, we use the 21st century language. You act like we balling up in here and like we don't know. But it's just certain things we still not going to condone. And again, I'll finish it by saying, I'm going to pop you upside your head. Like, again, every black child knows that and has experienced that. I'm going to pop you upside your head because you're talking stupid. But I'm also going to let you know, you're not going to come in here and take over my family. I'm the man of this house and I keep them protected.
Man, that, you know, that's powerful. It's like John Amos never became like a top rated actor or anything, but to understand the black experience, it's like Good Times and these shows that we're talking about, they should all be mandatory watching.
Word.
I know we don't want to overstay our time right here, but it seems to me, and we've talked about this before, like you are the Good Times man. And I kind of find, you know, I clearly enjoyed Good Times. I was there with you with that, but I'm more of the expert on like Sanford and Son and the Jeffersons. And, you know, an intriguing thing about the Jeffersons and Good Times, again, this dynamic between poor black folks and the middle class black folks. Intriguing about these two shows is that in both of those CBS TV shows, the wife on that show in real life was like 18 to 20 years older than the husband who played on the show, right? The other thing is, James Evans, we often see memes on the internet like, which one of these fathers would you let handle this situation? And you have like James, and you'll have, you know, Cliff Huxtable and the dude from Growing Pains, or Uncle Phil from, you know, Fresh Prince, right? One thing that always struck me about John Amos's presence, and I didn't find this out until recently, like, I think he was supposed to have a football scholarship, or he was playing football at one time. Yep. James Evans, John Amos has an incredible physical force on that show.
Yes, okay? Yes.
The flip side of the reason why I'm bringing that up is that when Sherman Hemsley was cast as George Jefferson on the Jeffersons, first of all, he wasn't available. He was doing a Broadway show, a Broadway musical, I think in Philadelphia. He's from Philadelphia. And when that's why on All in the Family, they introduced Mel Stewart as George instead of Sherman Hemsley, because he wasn't done with his other obligations. But what's intriguing to me is that Isabel Sanford, who played Weezy on the Jeffersons, his wife, she originally rejected Sherman Hemsley because she wanted a guy that had more of a physical presence.
Wow.
She wanted a guy that was like John Amos, like, you gonna give me this little guy that's gonna be my husband?
Wow.
And it's intriguing, you know. The thing that was what strikes me about that, another thing that I can relate to personally, is that my father wasn't a big guy either. My father might have been about 5'7". But what the thing that made me connect to George, like I said, growing up in Detroit, we had this little interracial thing, because when I was growing up in Detroit, we had two white neighbors, right? And we always had little things that my father would get into, little tiffs with both of his white neighbors from time to time. And through George Jefferson, even though he's a small guy, George Jefferson said things to white America and to white people on that show that I feel like my father would be jumping up and down sometimes in front of that TV, you know, for something that George said. I could feel through George Jefferson, like he's saying things that perhaps my father could not say because, you know, he worked in a plant. he worked his way up to being a foreman eventually. But I wonder what that was like working in a plant, being a black man. And I wonder, it just makes me feel that George Jefferson was saying, again, I get back to this thing about you can't say this on TV. You can't have a black man calling a white person a honky on TV. And my father was from the South, as was my mother. And I'm quite sure there's things that they just could not do in the presence of white people, you know, directly. And George Jefferson did that on TV. So I think that's one of the things that connected me, because I felt through George Jefferson how my father must have felt.
So I think that's a good way to wrap this up. So in the end, I chose Good Times because I saw a lot of my dad in James Evans. So you chose or choose to talk about the Jeffersons because you see a lot of your dad in George Jefferson.
In some ways, I see, you know, the stature, not being a big guy. And again, I think we could say that we lived a middle-class lifestyle. I mean, we weren't, say, on the same level as the Jeffersons, how they moved up to this, this high-rise apartment on the east side. We didn't have all of that, but it was something that we looked to, like, this is possible, right?
I'm glad you said that, because I was going to ask that question as well. I related to a lot of things on Good Times because we weren't poor. And I wouldn't even say we're lower middle class. I went to private school for 6 years. So I'm definitely not going to claim that. But I'll say, because my father was the only one working, my mother was we'll use the quotes, the stay-at-home mom, really your mom. I don't ascribe to a stay-at-home mom. My mom stayed at home and took care of the house when my dad went to work. But to give her that label, just like Florida. And so in terms of, from an economic standpoint, I again saw the Evans family in similar cases like my family, where now for those who, for the audience benefit, Marcus and I grew up, probably at best 3 miles from each other. I mean,
3 miles, you tripping, dog. It couldn't have been even 1 mile.
I might give it a mile. Yeah, I'll probably say, well, if you took off the half, because I was a half mile from 6. So I was closer to 7.
And then I was a half a mile from Myers. So I'm going to give it about a mile.
All right. So that's how close we grew up. And we even attended the same school, same junior high school for a hot second, but just not at the same time. But yet, in a lot of ways, our upbringing, sometimes the way I reflect on our neighborhood is almost like it was more like what Good Times was going through in Chicago. And like you said, y'all weren't upper middle class. I mean, y'all weren't upper like the Jeffersons were, but y'all were a solid middle class Black family. And so where our family, we had 3 kids. And so Christmas was rough. We got 1 present on Christmas, and my dad was like, you better be happy with just getting that. And we were like, okay, and we didn't have the material aspect. Did you see? It's interesting to me now. Again, we haven't rehearsed this, but I wonder if that part of resonated with you as well, being in the Jeffersons. Y'all weren't poor, but y'all had some money.
Man, dog, there's some things. This is gonna have to be an ongoing series because there's too much that's coming out. And stuff starts to pop up in your mind. And I'm thinking, you break this down, there's portions of your life that you saw on Good Times, whereas on the Jeffersons had 1 child, just like me. Right. Then I looked at the Cosby Show and I'm like, Theo was me. I felt that way. It was like, you're supposed to be achieving this. Theo was just kind of going through life, just kind of whatever. And the parents was like, you got to stay on this road right here. So, God, there's so many things that I can bring out of this. I wanted to show another clip. I'm not going to show it right now because it's getting late. But the other thing that strikes me about George Jefferson that strikes me is that this guy came from poverty. He worked his way up. There's actually an episode on All in the Family that showed how George Jefferson came into the money to start Jefferson Cleaners. But George was always trying to go after that white money. He was always trying to he didn't want to be down here with these Black folks. He wanted to be up there with where these white folks was. And he was always, the owner of his building, he was always just like, man, I got to meet this guy. He's got to come over here for dinner. He was just always chasing, I want to be there. But there were aspects of his personality that would not let him forget where he came from. And that's another thing that struck me about George. He wanted to be there. He was trying to be there. He wanted to imitate where he wanted to go, but he still had this, he can't forget where he came from. There was an episode where he went back to the hood in this rundown neighborhood where he was at. And it was the exact same house where he grew up. And he was that family who lived in the house, the actual house where the apartment that they lived in. He would give them a Christmas present every year, and he was their secret Santa. It was amazing. So this is another thing that made me connect with George Jefferson.
And so let me just combine it both as we close this out. I think that's the connection that's going to make this discussion so deep, because that's the connection that I have with the Jeffersons as well. Because I would say that perfectly describes my father. That on one end, we went to a white church, ended up sending his kids
like me.
to a white school. There
Just
you go.
like me.
But there still was that limiting, you can tell our parents went through that, let's integrate kind of phase, and maybe white folks are going to accept us. And then these sitcoms showed us, and it probably showed them, I guess, man, it's a trip. What was our parents thinking when they were watching this? Because if anything, it showed them that no matter how far you think you're moving up in the 70s, and then what we later on would see they were hitting the 80s, no matter how far you think you're stepping up, these are some of the problems that you're going to run into. And I watched my dad struggle with those same things as well.
Man, see, this is why we're gonna have to pull the plug, because we're going all night with this. But there was another thing that you struck me with this. I actually wrote a blog post about this. I'll get into that another time. But man, we used to go to a Catholic church, right? I was baptized in a Catholic church, and it was always so weird to me. I'm like, there was a few Black families there, but I used to always look like, well, what are we doing here? I'm falling asleep listening to these sermons from these Catholic priests. I swear, the first time I went to a Black Baptist church, I was in shock.
You got to
There were certain aspects about the way I was being raised that I noticed. It was like my parents both came from the South, and they were pushing to get to that middle class lifestyle, and that's what they wanted. So there were certain things that my friends in the neighborhood could do that I could not do. And I'm living this through them. And there's things that I didn't understand that they didn't necessarily talk about. Like, this is, okay, we talked about this before, like when we used to watch the Dukes of Hazzard. Why didn't our parents tell us about that flag on top of that car? Okay, right. But there's a lot of these aspects that come out in these shows where if your parents don't tell you, you're not going to understand the significance. Because there was a period when I was a kid, I used to call my mother Mammy, right? I don't know where I saw that on TV, but my mother checked me. I ain't your mammy, and don't call me Mammy. But she didn't explain why. It wasn't until years later, like,
that's what Mammy is.
I get it now. But these are the conversations you got to have with your kids. And these TV shows are a good springboard as you are doing with your kids to have these conversations.
Yes. Well, on that note, y'all, we're going to close this out. Man, is there anything else you want to add? Anything else you're working on, you want to plug, anything like that? Feel free, man. Go ahead.
Dog, I'm just looking forward to the next episode. That's all I'm going to say, because it's too much, dog. We can go on with this. This could be a whole channel in itself.
Yes. So, all right, y'all, we're going to go ahead and close this out. This is what you should expect. We're going to go through episodes. We're going to kind of take our time. We haven't really decided whether we're going to do like episode 1, because like you said, Jeffersons has 11 seasons. Good Times has 6 seasons. And then not including Sanford and Son. So we're going to jump around, but we're going to choose those episodes that impacted our lives that we also feel impact society as we're talking about it now, where basically I'm saying, those are some timeless episodes. They're still teaching us lessons. And we may kind of do some paper reading. In other words, what is happening in the media now? And we may end up finding those episodes in one of those sitcoms to say they address this exact topic and delve into it that way.
Dude,
Want to say something?
I'm gonna let you close this out. We do need to close this out, but what you just said now, it reminds me like Archie Bunker strongly supported Richard Nixon. That's my boy Rick. That's my boy. He would never do nothing like that. And it was at the time like Watergate was just about to jump off. And now we looking at, I don't know if you've seen some of these videos of these white people crying because Donald Trump is gone. Have you seen that?
No.
It was like, no, you can't say nothing about Richard Nixon. Those are all lies. And I'm like, really?
So I think it's safe to say that if Archie Bunker was live on TV now, he'd be a Trump supporter.
He'd be a Trump supporter, no doubt. There's no doubt about it. We talk about those dog whistles, man.
Yes. And I'm gonna have to think, would James be a Biden supporter? I don't know. Matter of fact, I'm going to say, I'll put this out here. I don't think James Evans would vote. I think he'd be probably where I'm at. So I don't think James Evans would vote.
I got a better question. Would George Jefferson be a Republican or a Democrat?
Ooh.
He's a businessman. He came out of poverty, but there was an episode of the Jeffersons where Florence was trying to form a maids union. There was several, this is what I'm saying about George Jefferson. There was episodes where he was, I'm better than y'all Negroes now, but his wife kept pulling him back down to earth, and certain episodes in his life would not let him fully become that sellout Negro. So, man, it's deep, dude. It's deep.
Oh, we're gonna leave that as the cliffhanger and one to think about. Would George Jefferson be a Democrat or Republican? You make a great point.
We have to explore that. Point. We have to explore that. You said this week. I forgot to tell you this, but you said that this week. I was listening to one of your messages on WhatsApp, and you said something. I can't remember what the subject was, but you was like, I can't remember. I'm gonna have to pull it back up. But you was like, somebody was like, well, I may not be a millionaire, but I'm a 10,000-aire. George Jefferson said that on one of the episodes. He said, because Weezy checked him, said, I'm not a millionaire, but I'm a 1,000-aire. Like, he's big stuff, right?
Mm-hmm. Yep. Oh, man.
Anyway.
All right, y'all. We're going to close it out. It's been another episode. As everybody always says, and I'm going to encourage you, if Black sitcoms are your thing, or if it's something that you're interested in, and even if not, check out the other videos on the channel, like and subscribe below. Marcus is our resident Brazilian expert. He's down in Brazil. So I think we're going to see some other angles come in. And I like how you already brought in some of the challenges even going on in Brazil that even relate to these sitcoms. So y'all, like and subscribe below. Feel free to share. And, I can encourage you and definitely let us know some of your classic famous moments that you remember as a kid, especially you Gen Xers. Some moments you remember as a kid. Leave it down in the comments below and let's get a good dialogue started. So on that note, brother, as always, man, I want to say thank you. I couldn't tackle this topic without you. So thanks, man. And everybody, we'll holler at y'all later. Peace.
All right. I'm out.